Introduce myself. My name is Galit Wellner. I'm from Tel Aviv University, Israel. And today I'd like to talk about AI algorithms and the question of their creativity, whether they can be creative, whether they have imagination. Until recently, the question of creativity and imagination of algorithms was thought to be something unimaginable, something that is science fiction. But like 3 years ago, in 2018, Christie's sold this portrait, which is called the Portrait of Edmund Bellamy, for more than $400,000. This portrait, as you can see from the signature at the bottom right corner, was not created by a human being. It was created by an algorithm that was developed by 3 PhD students. And it was the first time that a painting generated by an AI algorithm reached such a huge amount of money in an auction so famous. But again, that was not the first time that an algorithm managed to be creative and develop works of art. I have here 2 examples from 2 different artistic disciplines. On the left, you can see the work of Patrick Tresset, a Belgian artist who developed robots that managed to draw, in this case, portraits, but also other things they can draw. Very nice pictures. They draw hundreds and even thousands of them. Sometimes he puts like several of them in the same room so that they all paint the same thing. And of course, each robot comes up with a different drawing of the same object. On the right, we can see a robot that is playing marimba. But it's not just playing it according to some predefined script. It improvises jazz. And if you search Shimon the robot, you will see many video clips of the robot improvising with other human players very nicely, I must admit. In order to understand what imagination is, I'd like to go to Kant, who defined what we think today about imagination. And allow me to take very few minutes and go through with you here. Kant says imagination is the faculty of representing an object even without its presence in intuition. The fact that I can think now of what it's like to be with you in the same room, let's say there's no corona, okay? This is the kind of imagination that Kant has in mind. And he explains how it works. And it works through what he calls synthesis of intuitions according to categories. And these categories mean that we have them predefined, but then it's an act that first conjoins, and I quote here, the manifold of intuitions, and then it performs on that manifold kind of a schematism of concepts. I have to come up with a concept in order to think of something. For example, if I look at the clouds and I see there a monster, or I see there a queen or a princess, these are concepts that I have in my mind before I look at the clouds. Now, the schema, it's like a common denominator for a group of images. It's not an image in and of itself, okay? It's just a common denominator of all the cats or princesses or whatever. It cannot be reduced to a single image. Now, with the concept of the schema, imagination kind of bridges between the perception, what I see, what I hear, and my understanding, okay? Yeah, now I see there a princess. Or yeah, now I understand that this is a conference. Now the schema kind of serves as something that is very foundational. This is how we experience the world. We cannot experience the world without a schema. But then I look at algorithms. For example, this funny algorithm that manages to tell us the difference between a cat and sundae cream, ice cream. And although they look very familiar, the algorithm knows the difference between a cat and the ice cream. And it does so without having one fixed image of a cat or of an ice cream. The cat can shut its eyes and it will still be different from the ice cream. So in a sense, these algorithms, they do exactly what Kant is telling us. And while we tend to think of imagination as something that is unique to humans, very much influenced by Kant's theory, we realize that the algorithms are doing the same thing. With that in mind, with this notion of imagination that is shared by algorithms and humans, I'd like to check the question of creativity as defined by Margaret Boden. And she defines creativity as something that is combined of three elements. The first one is novelty. Now, without novelty, the result is just mirroring or recreating something that is reproductive. Uh, for example, when Shimon the robot, when it plays jazz, this is something that comes with something that is novel, that is new. The second element is the value. We need a value because without value, the result is just nonsense. Value might be related to some kind of understanding. And this is something that is unique for humans. We need humans to produce this value. And last one is the element of surprise. It's a condition, for example, that we saw in AlphaGo when it played against Lee Sedol in step 37, the famous step in which it came up with something that was so surprising for Lee Sedol that he understood that at this stage the software won. So these three elements help us understand what is algorithmic creativity. They can be novel, they can surprise us, but with the values, we need human beings. So that led me to come up with a layered model, a model in which there are layers that compose the imagination or the creativity, and each layer is under the responsibility of either humans or algorithms. Now, this model has been already developed by Deleuze and Guattari in the book Thousand Plateaus. And these plateaus, they don't have any hierarchy, and they define and they use this metaphor a lot. For example, they explain how they wrote their book, and they said, and I quote here, each morning we would wake up and each of us would ask himself what plateau he was going to tackle, writing 5 lines here, 10 there. We had hallucinatory experiences. We watched lines leave one plateau and proceed to another like columns of tiny ants. We made circles of convergence. Each plateau can be read starting anywhere and can be related to any other plateau. So with this model in mind, I'd like to develop my own theory of imagination. My model is composed of 3 basic elements. The first one, where the human operator is required, is just to start the project, define the algebraic formula. For example, in the case of the portrait of Edmund Bellamy, find the money for it, and find computer powers. For example, in order to create this image of a black hole, we can't see it by definition, but this image was created, and now we can imagine what a black hole looks like. But in order to do that, it's not enough to have an algorithm. We need also lots of servers to do that. The second element is the data collection. Somebody has to collect the data, to select the content type, to select the resources, okay? And these resources, they would determine the final results. The portrait of Edmund Bellamy is the result of thousands of portraits that were collected. So the verb to curate is required also here. And the last element is, of course, the generation of meaning. And here, meaning is usually, there are attempts to mechanize the meaning creation. And the meaning is created via vectors of words so that the proximity between two words is calculated. The more words are close to each other, it means that a certain meaning is created. Sometimes it works. For example, look at the top line, flowers versus insects. Flowers are usually near words that are pleasant or the equivalent of pleasant, and insects are near unpleasant. But apparently, if you take the same pleasant and unpleasant and use it on European American names versus African American names, you get it all wrong. It's just wrong. And this is where AI needs the human operator to develop the values, the relevant values. We cannot allow it imagine and be creative without our involvement. Okay, otherwise what we see is what is called spurious correlations. And you can find correlations between any two data sets. For example, here I show the per capita consumption of mozzarella cheese in the US and the number of people who died by falling down the stairs. Okay, there is a correlation, but it doesn't mean anything. It's meaningless. So my model says human and AI work in collaboration. Uh, the human comes up with new ideas, new meanings, new layers, and AI just combines the content, come up with more content, and generates new combinations. Human and technologies are co-shaped, they shape each other, and each actor is responsible to a different set of actions or layers, and humans need to be in the loop. So the co-shaping model would enable us to bypass the difficult questions, for example, of copyright in machine-created works of art, or whether to grant a right to free expression to machines. We need to see machines and humans as entangled together. So my conclusions are AI and humans, they work in collaborations and one need the other. And although AI systems are highly complex, we can and should demand for humans involved in their development and operation to ensure that they act in a responsible and ethical way. Thank you so much. Here's a list of my 3 articles that I published so far, and I will be happy to share them with you. Thank you so much.